warm welcome to The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up within the hour. At least 28 people injured after Afghan asylum seeker runs into a trade union rally in Munich, Germany. President Donald Trump wants the Department of Education to be closed immediately after U.S. ranked 40th with China in top 5. Plus, Mr. Trump says NATO membership for Ukraine is impractical after speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. Welcome again, everyone. Begin in Europe, where police in Germany have arrested a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker after he drove a vehicle into a group of people in Munich, injuring at least 28 people. Reports say that the car accelerated before hitting a trade union rally. An officer fired one shot at the suspect before he was arrested. Some of the people injured include employees of the Munich city administration. Chancellor Olaf Scholz says the suspect must be punished and must leave the country, and that if it was an attack, consistent action must be taken against possible perpetrators with all means of justice. Bavaria's Prime Minister Markus Söder insists the crash was a suspected attack. It comes just days before the country's federal election on February 23rd to elect the 630 members of the 21st Bundestag. It also coincides with Munich's preparations to host a security conference which attracts leaders from around the world. And in neighboring France, 12 people have been injured after a grenade was thrown into a busy bar in the city of Grenoble. The motive for the attack is not clear, but investigators believe it may be linked to a settling of scores. One eyewitness says the suspect, still unidentified as at press time, may also have been carrying a Kalashnikov assault rifle. But authorities are ruling out a link to terrorism, instead describing the incident as an act of extreme violence. There were many people at the scene of the attack, which is located in the city's Olympic Village neighborhood. Well, there could be some relief for the Middle East this weekend as Palestinian militant group Hamas says it's committed to implementing the Gaza ceasefire deal with Israel and will continue releasing hostages as scheduled. This had raised a huge concern this week as rhetoric between Israeli authorities and Hamas militants grew over the possibility of both not honoring the deal this weekend. Israel had said on Tuesday that the ceasefire would end if Hamas did not return hostages by Saturday. Hamas had earlier said it was postponing releases over what it claimed were Israeli violations. Israel is yet to respond to Hamas' latest commitment, but Egyptian and Qatari reports suggest mediators had bridged the gaps between the two sides, and both are committed to continuing implementation of the deal. Staying in the region, U.S. President Donald Trump has sent a message to the people of Jordan, telling them that they are fantastic people with tremendous brilliance and energy. The address followed his meeting with the Jordanian king a couple of days ago. In the address, President Trump said they have a king who is a tremendous man, a leader who has a wonderful heart and who loves his country so much. Mr. Trump and the Jordanian king had met in the White House on Tuesday to discuss Jordan taking in Palestinian refugees from Gaza as part of his plan to empty out the enclave for an American takeover. Speaking to the press after their meeting, the Jordanian King Abdullah did not outrightly reject the president's idea, but his discomfort with the plan was obvious as he indicated alternative proposals for Gaza would be forthcoming. Jordanians have criticized the U.S. president over the proposal to resettle displaced people of Gaza in Jordan and Egypt.
To the great people of Jordan, you're a spectacular group. I have to tell you, you're very, very fantastic people with tremendous brilliance and energy. I want to just say that you have a king who is a tremendous man. He's a leader. He's got a wonderful heart. He loves you so much. He loves his country. He's done amazingly. King Abdullah is one of the true great leaders of the world. And I just want to tell you, you're lucky to have him. And I say that from my heart. You are very, very lucky to have him. and God bless you all.
Moving on to domestic issues in the U.S., President Trump has described the Department of Education as a big con job that should be closed immediately. He was making the remarks during a press briefing on Wednesday. He compared the quality of education with other countries in the ranking, pointing to the success of Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and particularly China in having secured spots in the top 5.
I'd like it to be closed immediately. Look, the Department of Education's a big con job. We're ranked, so they rank the top 40 countries in the world. We're ranked number 40th, but we're ranked number 1 in one department, cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world, but we're ranked number 40. We've been between 38 and 40. The last time I looked, it was 38, and then I looked 2 days ago, it came out the new list. It came out at number 40, so we're ranked 40. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, I hate to say it, China, as big as it is, it's ranked in the top 5.
Meanwhile, hundreds of federal workers and lawmakers gathered outside the U.S. Capitol in Washington, calling on Congress to denounce Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency's efforts to reduce the federal workforce. Protesters marched with signs and listened to speeches as part of the American Federation of Government Employees annual legislative conference. The rally was organized in response to ongoing attempts to reduce the federal workforce under the leadership of Elon Musk, head of the newly established DOGE with support from U.S. President Donald Trump. The AFGE is among several organizations taking legal action to prevent Mr. Musk and others from accessing federal records, while also working to block the Trump administration's plan to offer payments to federal workers in exchange for their resignation.
And you know what it's about? It's about these billionaires making sure that they line their pockets, that they have the funding they need for their tax cuts. That's exactly what this is about. This is not about saving. You know what? This president promised us that he was going to care about bringing down the cost of groceries. He promised us that he was going to care about bringing down the cost of gas or health care or housing. Have you heard those things said yet?
We will not abandon you in your hour of need, because we are you, and you are us, the American people. And so let me just end by saying, even though we've got these out of control, unelected billionaires trying to turn back the clock, we're not going back. We're going to keep moving forward. We're not going to let them unwind the progress that you and others have fought to accomplish. Hard work, civil rights, labor rights, organizing, all the progress that has been made. We're not going to let them turn back the clock. We're going to press on. Press on for you. Press on for the union. Press on for everyday Americans. Press on for civil service. Press on for collective bargaining. Press on for our democracy. Press on.
My friends, you're not villains, you're heroes for America. You do what people need being done so that their lives are better. That's what you are. Heroes for America. You keep on keeping on, and I will tell you, every member who speaks here,
It's no problem if we want to see a change, but you got to at least do it legally, right? So they're doing this under efficiency in the federal government, but they're creating chaos, confusion, consternation, and take a picture of yourself and whoever is next to you, because what people like to see and like to believe is that federal employees are not real people. I see a lot of people right here in front of me. And so make sure you take a picture of yourself and your neighbor. You post it to your social media and you let people know this is what hard work looks like.
Now let's segue into Europe, where Austria's far-right populist Freedom Party says it has ended its attempts to form a coalition government with the Conservative People's Party. The announcement follows several weeks of heated negotiations and marks the second time coalition talks have failed since September's election. The OVP first attempted to form a three-party coalition with the Social Democrats and the Liberal Neos, with then a two-party coalition with the Social Democrats, but both efforts collapsed. The leader of the Freedom Party, Herbert Kickl, has called for swift new elections and blamed OVP for the collapse, accusing the party of being unwilling to make compromises and playing power games. Welcome back. NATO membership for Ukraine is impractical, and that's the latest comment on the issue coming from US President Donald Trump. He was responding to a question in the Oval Office on the issue.
Well, we had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed. We're very far away from that particular war, but that's a vicious war. Probably 1.5 million soldiers killed in a short period of time. I've never seen anything. I have pictures that are, you wouldn't believe it. No, people didn't really know what President Putin's thoughts were, but I think I can say with great confidence he wants to see it ended also. That's good. And we're going to work toward getting it ended, and as fast as possible. And we're going to be meeting, actually tomorrow they're meeting in Munich, as you know, and we're going to have some other meetings, and I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia. The first time we'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done. I don't think it's practical to have it, personally. I know that a new Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is something that's not going to happen.
Well, it appears President Trump was backing comments from the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who had said on Wednesday that NATO membership for Ukraine was unrealistic. He suggested that Kyiv abandons hopes of winning all its territory back from Russia and instead prepare for a negotiated peace settlement to be backed by international troops.
We are at, as you said, Mr. Secretary, a critical moment. As the war approaches its third anniversary, our message is clear. The bloodshed must stop, and this war must end. President Trump has been clear with the American people and with many of your leaders that stopping the fighting and reaching an enduring peace is a top priority. He intends to end this war by diplomacy and bringing both Russia and Ukraine to the table. And the U.S. Department of Defense will help achieve this goal. We will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace by coupling allied strength with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. A durable peace for Ukraine must include robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again. This must not be Minsk 3.0. That said, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine. To further enable effective diplomacy and drive down energy prices that fund the Russian war machine, President Trump is unleashing American energy production and encouraging other nations to do the same. Lower energy prices, coupled with more effective enforcement of energy sanctions, will help bring Russia to the table.
And we hear from the former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson backing what US President Donald Trump is trying to achieve since his return to office last month. Mr. Johnson remarked on the tragedy unfolding in Gaza, but denounced Hamas as a destabilizing force in the enclave, and noting his approval of the recent proposal to redevelop the territory. Commenting on the war in Ukraine, he assured that he did not see how Mr. Trump could abandon Ukraine. He noted that Ukrainians want to be free and dismissed the viability of any solution that would not give Ukraine any sense of where it's going.
Sympathetic to many of the things that I think Donald Trump is trying to do, and I think that the world is on the whole better when America is strong and providing strong leadership. And I think that that is certainly what Donald Trump is capable of providing. What's happening in Gaza, what has happened in Gaza, is an absolute tragedy. And it needs to end, and the suffering of the people of Gaza needs to end. The hostages need to come back. And I think it's horrific that the conditions in which those hostages have been held, and I think they all need to come back. It's not for me to try to analyze what the president is suggesting. What Hamas did, frankly, was destabilizing. And I think that the problem in Gaza, to be, since we're being very, very candid with each other in the privacy of this audience of 4,000 people, frankly, you can't go on with a situation in which you have a Gaza ruled by a government that wants to exterminate Israel. And it's not for me to try to analyze what the president is saying, but I think he's inviting everybody to say, well, look, this place plainly does have great potential. It does have a wonderful location, and I think it's reasonable to point that out and to ask people to speculate, and to ask people in this part of the world to speculate about how it could be improved and how collectively, working together, life for people in Gaza could be improved. And it doesn't seem to me that since 2005, the lives of people in Gaza have notably improved under the rule of Hamas.
Meanwhile, as NATO defense ministers met in Brussels this week, Secretary General Mark Rutte said members should pay considerably more for their defense, while US President Donald Trump demanded an increase to 5% of the national output. Poland led the pack in 2024 with a marked increase in its defense spending since Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 3 years ago. Its spending grew from 1.88% of the GDP in 2014 to 2.23% in 2022, 3.26% in 2023, and 4.12% in 2024. Overall, the 32 NATO members devote $1.474 billion to their defense. Of that, $476 billion comes from European countries, just under half for the $968 billion spent by the United States. Well, in his address to defense ministers from NATO countries, Mark Rutte highlighted progress in defense spending, announcing that NATO allies in Europe and Canada invested $485 billion in defense, a nearly 20% increase compared with 2023. He expects allies to spend even more in 2025. The meeting in Brussels focuses on strengthening defense industrial capacity, including through an updated defense production action plan.
Welcome to this meeting of NATO defense ministers. We will focus on some key priorities for our summit in The Hague, which is only 4 months from now, I started to realize today. So it is quite soon. Defense spending will be priority number 1. To stay safe and to prevent war, we need to spend a lot more, especially in Europe and Canada. All allies stepped up defense investment in recent years, and European allies carry now a much bigger share of the burden than before. In the last 10 years, European allies and Canada have added more than $700 billion for defense. That means that in 2024, NATO allies in Europe and Canada invested almost $500 billion in defense, and that is nearly a 20% increase compared with 2023. But still, it is far from enough. We need to do much, much more. But we can do it. The proof is in what we did in 2023 going into 2024. The second priority is defense production and the need to boost the defense industry across the alliance. Yes, we do have the best industries in the world, from the US, the whole of Europe, including Turkey, the proud defense industry base in Turkey, but we must produce more, faster, and together to outpace our competitors, Russia, China, and others. Third, we will discuss Russian destabilization campaigns against our countries, including the Shadow Fleet and how we respond. We know the Shadow Fleet is a large source of income for Russia. Baltic Sentry is a good example of how we can deter better. And then finally, when we leave this room and we go into lunch, we will discuss what more we can do to support Ukraine. Defense Minister Umerov and EU High Representative Kaja Kallas will join us.
Meanwhile, the Netherlands Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans says Europe should be at the table. He was hitting back after the White House suggested EU nations should not be currently involved in Ukraine talks. A joint statement of 7 countries and the European Commission says European powers have to be a part of any future negotiations on the fate of Ukraine, underscoring that only a fair accord with security guarantees would ensure lasting peace.
I think it's very important that Zelensky will be at the negotiation table. As I think we all say in a united way, no discussions about Ukraine without Ukraine. The same is true for Europe, because, of course, what is negotiated also has implications for security in Europe. So we think that Europe should also sit at the table, of course, especially when there are talks about security guarantees. We need to make sure that also European countries are able to engage in these discussions. Of course, there's always a discussion within Europe who represents. Personally, that's for me not the most important question. The most important question is that we make sure that there are no negotiations about European security architecture, no negotiations about security guarantees without the involvement of European countries. I think what we need to do now is to make progress very soon, because we have had long discussions in the past. Now things are becoming more clear, and we need to make sure that we get to peace through strength, that we define what that strength means. We need to define what robust security guarantees mean, and we need to make sure that throughout this process that we stay united, and that we make sure that all the parties that are relevant, Ukraine, European countries, are also sitting at the table. I think we need to play an important role to safeguard our own security in Europe, and we need to play a more important role in Ukraine, also to create security guarantees there. So I think there is no option to not be at the table, because we are very important in the actual implementation of those security guarantees. And I think there's also a lot that we can bring to the table. There's a lot that we can do together. And in the end, if we work together on this, we are much stronger than if we work on this individually.
Let's bring in Dr. Tony Agbon, Senior Lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University in London. Dr. Agbon, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Joker, for inviting me to your program.
Right. So first off, do you think NATO will have smooth relations with the U.S., under President Donald Trump?
Yeah, thank you. Listening to a lot of the stories you have brought out, and then listening to all the optics and all the sound bites we've all been hearing since the historic phone call between President Trump and President Putin yesterday, is like this whole crisis between Russia and Ukraine, just starting all over again. It's come back more to the front burner. I think there are a lot of issues here. Obviously, the NATO alliance, they are not happy. The European Union, they are not happy. But truth be said, it's high time that a stop be put to this, carnage and bloodbath that has been going on between Russia and Ukraine. So they won't be happy, obviously.
It's clear that the present government under President Donald Trump, in the United States, does not support Ukraine's efforts at NATO membership, or is not even bothered whether it's a member or not. We have heard from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and from President Donald Trump himself about Ukraine's NATO membership, and President Trump has encouraged Ukraine to let go of certain regions. Is the U.S. still an ally of Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and this is going to be the sore point of these negotiations when it eventually begins. For the sake of our, those who will be watching this program, we need to put certain things in context. This crisis between Russia and Ukraine is in two phases. Let's not forget that in February 2014, Russia did annex some territories in Ukraine. We remember Crimea. There were a lot of issues, the bogus referendum and all that took place. And the Ukraine was trying to get their territory back. There have been a lot of issues back and forth on that. But what really shook the entire world was when just about 3 years ago, in February 2022, Russia had this, what they call the military operation, but which was an all-out aggression against Ukraine. And they actually went into Ukraine, went into Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, another part of eastern Ukraine. And we've had this crisis we've had. So to say that membership of NATO, to say that some territories will not be given, this is my opinion. I think every issue should be on the table of negotiation so that no side, will feel hard done by. I believe every issue should be discussed. But sincerely speaking, I think we are moving in the right direction. The world is moving in the right direction, that at least the parties can be brought together and everyone discuss. Both Ukraine, Russia, Europe, NATO, the United States of America, everyone needs to come to the negotiating table.
Even if that happens, the most recent developments seems like a huge blow to Ukraine and almost negates its defense against Russia, which seems to have the upper hand in this war. Do you think the U.S. president knows that he is indirectly helping Russia?
Yeah, knowing Donald Trump, we all know how he does his things. During his campaign, he made a lot of promises about how he hopes to resolve this war. There are going to be a lot of knockbacks. Nobody should think that this whole negotiation, this bringing of peace between Russia and Ukraine is going to be a walk in the park. To be honest, and just like you have alluded to, Ukraine has suffered more in this crisis. They've been more devastated since this crisis began nearly 3 years ago. So, speaking from the humanitarian angle, you will feel that Ukraine, who have been the one that have been destroyed, will feel, a sense of, being cheated. So that is where the Americans, actually, like Donald Trump have said, using his negotiators and all that, they really need to see how it doesn't look like, just helping an adult to beat a child. That scenario should not come in. Otherwise, there will still be no peace. So I believe nothing, like I said, should be out of the table.
And remind us again, why even NATO cannot take a decision on admitting Ukraine into the group.
Yeah, I think that it's more of a military decision-making issue. There's an article in the NATO alliance treaty that a member nation cannot be attacked. An attack on one is an attack on all, and that will be an all-out third world war. And NATO has been wise in that they didn't just admit Ukraine. I think they admitted Finland and Sweden while these crises have started, but those ones needed some protection. So, and I believe NATO should keep it that way, because otherwise, if they had admitted Ukraine by now, and with some of the aggression from Russia, then it's like attacking a NATO member. So, what they have done, not bringing Ukraine in, I think is the right decision, and they should keep it so. But whether Ukraine will eventually join the NATO alliance, maybe not in the immediate future. I don't see that happening. And a lot of analysts will also say that, because that really is the crux of this crisis.
Right, and I believe the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, knows this and is playing on this to, make Ukraine weaker than it already is.
Absolutely. Putin knows that, and his fear is just that, Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, then the West will be at his doorstep. He believes that is not going to be, good for Russia. And at the end of it, when you look at all these crises, it's all about world geopolitical economics. So everyone is trying to protect his own interests. And if you look at Donald Trump, the truth of the matter is that he believes that America has spent so much. In your report just now, I was hearing on NATO, look at what they have spent, $485 billion in 2024. By the time we add what they spent in 2023, in 2022, we are talking of going over trillions of dollars. And these are resources that could have been utilized in other aspects of human development and growth. So it's all about national interest. And I believe that with the way things stand, the Russians seem to be having the upper hand.
And how strong is NATO against Russia's European influence?
Very strong, and rightly so. If there's anything that we will also give credit to, is the fact that the NATO alliance have been able to also stand up to Russia during this crisis. The unity of purpose, the way they've all rallied around Ukraine has been very, very commendable. The only thing for some of us analysts and commentators on this issue is that when a crisis like this occurs, the third party should be the one that will bring peace. For some of us, we have not been able to come to terms with the fact that, yes, Russia invaded Ukraine. The third parties, like NATO, the US under Joe Biden, the European Union, they should have all come together, to call for negotiations. In fact, I was reading, a paper recently, and I discovered that Joe Biden, former US president, have not had contact with the Russian president, Putin, since just probably a week before this invasion happened in February 2022. That is not good enough. It doesn't show statesmanship. And that is why these crises have lingered on. With all intent and purpose, despite all the anti-Trump sentiment and pro-Trump sentiment, I believe that time is now for peace to return to Russia, especially Ukraine. Peace needs to return.
Right, and it seems to me that Ukraine, is the biggest loser here. The President Zelensky, maybe pride of wanting to show that he can protect his people, and he's the captain of the Ukrainian ship. He's not budging. He is doing all he can to ensure that his people are safe, even though many are dying daily. But at the end of the day, Ukraine is still the biggest loser.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. Ukraine is the one taking all the bombardment, loss of lives, loss of infrastructure. And at the end of the day, every war that has happened, we are all students of history, usually will end on the negotiating table. I was really pleased yesterday when I saw the response of the Ukrainian president, when he spoke to, he put on his X handle, he spoke with President Donald Trump, and then he also said that Ukraine needs peace. I like that, tune that he was singing, which is great. And let's not deceive ourselves. If this war is not peacefully negotiated, we are going to be talking about Russia-Ukraine war even in the next 10 years. So, and the earlier the stop is put to it, the better. How this is eventually achieved shouldn't really matter. Pride, all parties in this crisis will need to swallow their pride and forge ahead with peace. Because, like it's often said, in conflict resolution, you cannot win it all. So it has to be a win-win for everyone. No loser, no vanquish.
Senior lecturer, Anglia Ruskin University in London, Dr. Tony Agbon. It's a pleasure again having you on the program today.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Elsewhere now, Canada's defense minister says U.S. President Donald Trump's talk of turning Canada into the 51st state is not a real threat. While the Prime Minister said, again, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell of that happening, the two were in Brussels to meet with NATO and European allies and members of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. They had a breakfast meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Wednesday morning. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, Mr. Blair said that while Mr. Trump's comments are disrespectful and concerning, he doesn't see them as a serious threat.
We met as the Ukraine Contact Group for the 26th time under the leadership of the United Kingdom. I think we had a very important and frank discussion about our unity and support for Ukraine. I also had the opportunity yesterday to meet with Minister Umerov and reiterated to him our continuing support to continue to provide Ukraine with everything it needs to put themselves in their best possible bargaining position as we go forward towards a peaceful resolution of that conflict. Canada's is resolved that we will be there for Ukraine to ensure a just and endurable peace. And I assured Minister Umerov of our continuing commitment to do that. All of the members present also reiterated their continued support of Ukraine to enable them, to give them the tools that they need, because as Secretary Neely just said, they're still fighting. And we will be there for them to provide them with the support that they require to work towards that just and sustainable peace. Well, I think our resolve over the past, since almost 3 years now of this conflict, the alliance has been remarkably strong and resolved to provide Ukraine with the tools that they need to defend themselves against the illegal invasion that was perpetrated upon that country. That resolve remains. But we are also watching very carefully of the ongoing discussions that have been taking place between the President and Mr. Putin. It is essential from our perspective that Ukraine must be part of that negotiation, and then we're going to continue to support them to enable them to be in the strongest possible position to achieve that just and sustainable peace.
February marks the unofficial start of the tourist season in the Greek island of Santorini, when the first cruise ships are due to arrive and the Easter holidays approach. But with thousands of earthquakes shaking the island since January and experts unable to say when they will end, One cruise has already turned away. There are fears that the island's most important industry could be facing difficulty this year. But even if tourists don't choose to go elsewhere this year, hotels still face the prospect of not having enough staff to serve their guests come summer. Santorini, one of Greece's most visited islands, relies heavily on seasonal workers from other parts of Greece and abroad who help the permanent population of just over 15,000 to serve tens of thousands of tourists on the island each day in peak season. But the uncertainty over how the tremors will affect tourist numbers has forced some workers to reconsider their options this summer. And Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has stressed the need for African leaders to prioritize health as a national developmental agenda to ensure economic and national security on the continent. And this was part of the President's remarks at the Ministerial Executive Leadership Program, a meeting of ministers of health of African states on the sidelines of the 38th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The President's address was delivered by the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Professor Ali Pate, who emphasized how crucial sustaining and increasing domestic health financing is.
Achieving UHC requires that we as political leaders prioritize health financing, strengthen our primary health care, invest in our workforce development, and ensuring sustainable health security. And this means we must champion health as a national priority. Health must be positioned as a fundamental pillar of our national developmental agenda. And by increasing and investing in health, we know that we'll accelerate human capital accumulation, enhance our productivity for current and future generations, manifesting the demographic dividend, and also ensuring that we secure our economies. So health is a matter of economic security, it's also a matter of national security. 2, sustaining and increasing our domestic health financing. We cannot outsource our priorities to external funders. While we appreciate the 25 years of significant inflows in terms of global development assistance, we must be grateful for the lives that have been saved by those investments. But as a continent, we must take the opportunities of change, because change is inevitable. It's whether or not that we grow with that change that is our option. And we can seize the moments of change to mobilize better our national and continental domestic resources to finance our priorities.
As preparations for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, FFD4, continues to intensify, most developing countries expect that issues of financing for sustainable development goals will be addressed. They're also optimistic for attention will be paid to their debt burden. Nigeria's diplomat and vice chair of the 79th session of the United Nations Second Committee, Ezekwesili Anyegbu, in delivering Nigeria's statement, called for prioritization of reform in the international finance architecture to engender a rules-based, non-discriminatory international trading system. He would like to see a situation where goods from Africa are not restricted or categorized as substandard. He also called for the adoption of a UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation to ensure African economies are no longer shortchanged through exclusion in global tax decision-making. The FFD4 conference is scheduled to be held in Seville, Spain from June 30 to July 3rd, 2025.
It is the expectation of my delegation that the outcome document will, among other things, prioritize the reform of international financial architecture to engender a rule-based, non-discriminatory international trading system where goods from Africa are not restricted or categorized as substandard. Eradication of poverty must remain central in the outcome document. On the debt section, my delegation supports the calling, mentioned by the African group in the statement for the establishment of a multilateral sovereign debt working mechanism. The outcome document must prioritize comprehensive debt relief measures to provide developing countries, especially highly indebted African countries, the requisite physical space to sustainably finance the SDGs. Other issues of priority include deepening of measures on timely repatriation of illicit financial flows and assets, including the accruing interest, as the case may be. Support for the adoption of a UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation to ensure African economies are no longer shortchanged through tax evasion and exclusion in global tax decision-making. Increasing official development assistance as distinct from climate finance. Distinguished co-facilitators, I conclude by reaffirming my delegation's willingness and full cooperation to constructively engage in this process. I thank you.
A delegation of religious leaders has met with rebel group leaders in Goma as tensions continue to escalate in the wake of the M23's takeover of the eastern Congolese city. The meeting comes amid growing concerns over the ongoing violence and the humanitarian crisis unfolding in the region. A Catholic priest and political figure, Donatien Nholi, provided a glimpse into the discussions during the meeting, noting that the rebel leaders reassured the delegation that they were not pursuing the division of the country, nor were they engaged in illicit exploitation of resources. However, he also urged the reopening of key infrastructure such as the airport and port, which are vital for the region's recovery. With a combination of political, humanitarian and religious voices now calling for a ceasefire, there's hope that dialogue may pave the way for a lasting solution to the ongoing conflict in Goma and the broader eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that hundreds of thousands of people remain on the move in North Kivu and South Kivu. In North Kivu, partners report that more than 110,000 people have left displaced sites in Goma and started to move to villages in the Masisi, Rutshuru, and other territories. Earlier in the week, M23 rebels issued a 72-hour ultimatum for displaced people living in sites and collective centers in Goma to leave and return to their villages. They expressed their full support for voluntary return, saying they would not compel anyone to return without firm security guarantees. But OCHA and its humanitarian partners are also alarmed about the ongoing looting of infrastructure in sites for internally displaced people, with a consequent loss of humanitarian facilities at the sites, including water supply, health centers, and cholera treatment centers. The UN reiterated that all returns must be voluntary and take place under safe, informed, and dignified conditions in accordance with international humanitarian law. Now, the streets of Tainan in southern Taiwan were electrified by the explosive spectacle of firecrackers on Wednesday as the Yanshui Beehive Rockets Festival captivated locals and visitors alike. The streets were engulfed in thick white smoke, with participants dressed in motorbike helmets and scarves covering their faces, launching firecrackers and capturing the dazzling display. The two-day festival, organized by the Yanshui Wu Temple, is held annually on the 14th and 15th days of the first lunar month, coinciding with the Lantern Festival this year. It took place on February 11 to 12. The festival, named after the sound of firecrackers that resembles bees swarming from their hives, has been celebrated in Taiwan for over 130 years. That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.